Hey guys, Pastor Sean coming to you with today's daily devotion. We are in 1 Timothy chapter 4. We're going to look down here at verse 14. I'm going to move the camera over just a little bit so I can read my scripture. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 14. Do not neglect the gift that is in you, which was given to you by prophecy with a laying on of hands of the eldership. Meditate on these things and give yourself entirely to them, that your progress may be evident to all. The gifts that are inside of you, not only the spiritual gifts, we'll talk about that as well, but the talent, the gifts, the anointings that God has put in your life. Some of you have the gift of being able to draw and to paint and to do that. Some of you have the gift of being able to play musical instruments and sing and all that comes with that. Some of you have the gift of teaching and preaching. Some of you absorb knowledge like a sponge. Those are gifts and talents that the Lord has given to you. And your gift, your talent is unique to you. Nobody preaches like I preach. Nobody teaches like you teach. Nobody sings like certain people sing. And when you try to imitate somebody else, you're trying to imitate the gifts that God has given them when you actually should be using the gifts that God has given you. One of the things I learned early in ministry was that the things that God has put in me are for the ministry of where I'm at. When I first went to Resaca, I was very involved in boys' clubs, and I wrote a lot of the bulletin, typed out a lot of the bulletin, wrote a lot of different messages, wrote a lot of material for boys clubs and for children's ministries, youth ministries, different things like that. Wrote a lot of material because that gift of writing was inside of me. I was a journalism major in college and didn't complete that degree. But I was a journalism major in college, and so that talent that's in me to write came out while I was at Resaca. When I got to Elberton, I wrote more boys club material, more children's church material. When I became the pastor at New Life, I wrote sermon series. I would sit down and the Lord would pull out of me sermon after sermon after sermon after sermon, and I would write that down. I continue to write today. And not only do I write spiritual stuff, but I write short stories and different things like that. Always have, and hide them away so nobody can read them. But I write those sermon series out, and it'll be a 4 or 5 part series that is all tied in together. Where does that come from? That comes from the gifts that are inside of me. Those are the gifts that God has placed inside of you. Now, spiritual gifts. Gifts of tongues and interpretation of tongues and prophecy and healing and miracles and wisdom and knowledge, words of wisdom, words of knowledge, prophecy, all of these great gifts that are listed in the New Testament, they are yours as well when God deals them to you. I've never been in a church where we have more than 2 or 3 people who have certain gifts. Everybody has gifts. It's a matter of whether you use those gifts or not. And you use those gifts are stirred up by the laying on of hands. Some people have the gift of tongues and give out a message in tongues. Somebody else has to be there to have the gift of interpretation. Some people have the gift of discernment and can see in the spirit realm things that are right and things that are wrong. Paul says this, pray for the better gifts. And he goes on to say here, meditate on these things. Give yourself entirely to them so that your progress may be seen by all. Pray for the gifts of the Spirit. Pray for the fruit of the Spirit. Pray for the gifts that God has placed inside of you to be stirred up so that you can do the ministry of what God is doing in your church. Now, most of us go to Irwin Hill, and we need those gifts, we need those talents to be used in the ministry there at Irwin Hill. We need teachers. We need preachers. We need singers. We need musicians. We need the gifts that God has placed in you to come out to help the ministry grow. Wherever you're in church at, that's what those gifts are for. They're for you to be effective in the place where God has put you. So meditate on those things. Pray about those gifts. Ask God to give you the gifts so that they can be stirred up inside of you. I love you. I'm praying for you. I will see you again tomorrow. God bless you as always, is my prayer.